How do you think they would have large-scale, long-term studies about the effects of these drugs and these surgeries on children when we only started doing it to children at a large scale a few years ago? So how could that even exist?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. In this video, we're going to watch Matt Walsh debate a gentleman on gender-affirming care for children. Let's get it.
Why in your movies and your discussions do you selectively ignore and misrepresent the recent burgeoning medical and behavioral literature that demonstrates that gender-affirming care and similar medical interventions demonstrate consistent improvements to mental health, suicidality, and general well-being?
Which study are those?
There are probably like 30 studies by this point, all produced in the last like 10 years or so. Anybody can look them up on...
Okay, well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. I'm not impressed by just you saying a study,
No,
okay? Because
studies.
Fine. Well, there could be 100 studies. There could be 1,000 studies.
Them.
Great. Yeah, and I have read them. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So I'll give you one example. I don't know if you can give me any examples, but I'll give you one example of a recent study and this was just in the headlines. It said that it proved that double mastectomies for minor girls improves their well-being. And this was a study, and it was proven, peer-reviewed. Then you read how they actually conducted this study, and you find out that they interviewed a very small selection of girls in one region of the country, all from the same socioeconomic background, and they did their follow-up, I think it was 3 months later. And based on a follow-up a few months later, they've determined that, oh yeah, it improves well-being. You see the problem here?
It's crazy to me that you have a grown man advocating for this right here. Sometimes I understand it right out of the woke young university students. Even then I think it's crazy, but like I just figured they've been brainwashed by the system. This man looks like an adult advocating for kids to have their body parts chopped off. What they do to these kids is brutal. They take kids as young as like 10 years old and they put them on puberty blockers, which essentially what that does is it drops, for little girls, their estrogen down to 0. For little boys, their testosterone down to 0. And over 98% of the time, what happens is those little kids end up taking the opposite sex's hormone. Well, for little girls, after about 5 years of being on testosterone, when they're 10 or 11 years old, they have to get hysterectomies. We're castrating little boys. We're sterilizing our children. And really, what we should be teaching little kids is that there's no perfect way to be a little boy or a little girl. Over 90% of the time, when children are gender dysphoric, now, it's not the crazy number that the left will have you believe, but if people are gender dysphoric, have gender dysphoria, over 90% of the time, over 9 out of 10 of them, once they go through puberty, it stops. They might become straight men or straight women, they might become gay, but the gender dysphoria goes away. Just let people go through puberty. We need laws out here to protect these kids.
There are many, but this is the exception to the rule. Many of
I don't think it is.
Use observational data with various follow-up from like 6 months to 5 years to 10 years, and they don't demonstrate what you claim.
Well, you can say the word study, but what I'm saying is when you
look them up.
Okay, great, great.
You can Google them.
Yeah, and so can you. It sounds like you haven't.
I've done it a good bit.
Oh, you've done it a good bit. Okay, all right. Well, I just gave you an...
transgender health, PubMed, NIH, gender-affirming care, and I mean it's
Okay,
just
let me ask you this.
Anybody can look at this.
What's your name?
Jacob.
Jacob. Let me ask you this. How do you think they would have large-scale, long-term studies about the effects of these drugs and these surgeries on children when we only started doing it to children at a large scale a few years ago? So how could that even exist?
Matt's point here couldn't be any more valid. We don't have long-term side effects for a lot of this stuff, and now that we're starting to, it is not good. Like, imagine you went to the doctor and you had high blood pressure or a heart issue, and they wanted to put you on this brand new medication that's been out on the market for 2 or 3 months. Well, you would say no, right? Give me an ARB that's been out since like the 70s and 80s, that we have decades of data on, that we know the side effects, we know it's very safe. Don't put me on this new stuff. Put me on this stuff that we have years upon years upon years of collected studies on and data. You wouldn't just jump on this new drug. But now what we're doing is we're we're testing, well, not testing, we know what these drugs are, and we're giving them to kids, stuff like Lupron, who we give to sex offenders to chemically castrate them. Like, Lupron is given to women as well to have, like, endometriosis for more than 6 months. But the side effects of Lupron are horrible. Like, one of the worst ones being, like, long-term, irreversible cognitive impairment. Like, it messes up your brain of a small child, and we're pumping them full of hormones and, you know, chopping off the breasts of little girls. And the whole thing is disgusting. Like, we have age limits for drinking and driving, but this is okay. For some reason, a kid that still believes in the Easter Bunny should be allowed to tell you that he wants to be turned into a woman if it's a little boy, and you were just supposed to believe that.
Yeah, I think scale is probably one of the more prevalent challenges of these studies.
Okay, so we're already hearing that there are challenges in these studies.
Every study has challenges. Like any scientific truth, like all of the scientific truth that we take for granted today, they're built on methodologies that fundamentally have flaws. Like, if you want to make a specific critique, you can do that. If you're talking about
I just did.
Well, if you're talking about sample size, there are very well demonstrated statistical results that you don't need 10,000 people to get like a statistically significant value.
Yes, you do.
Don't.
Here's
no, absolutely not. It's like a very basic statistical fact.
Jacob.
A sample size greater than 1,000, that can that has very nice asymptotic properties. Like,
Jacob, here's what I know. If you want to even begin to claim that a study has proven that castrating and sterilizing little boys helps them in the long run, then you would need to have a large sample size of children who've gone through these procedures, and we've checked back with them in adulthood to see how they're doing. Those studies do not exist. They can't exist because we weren't doing this to kids at anywhere near this scale even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. What that tells us, Jacob, is that the kids we have right now, they are the sample.
Actually,
okay, they are the experiment. We are experimenting on children right now.
One of the big issues is that they're teaching this to kids in school, kindergarten, first grade, K2, K3. Like, very young kids are now in school learning about what it's like to be gender fluid, or maybe you're born in the wrong body. Like, look at this. This is from a school in British Columbia, Canada, my own country. This lesson plan has 2 parts. Part 1 uses a storybook to introduce and explore gender identity and gender pronouns she, he, they. By incorporating books with gender diverse characters in the classroom, students will appreciate the gender spectrum, fluidity, and the use of gender pronouns. Part 1 consists primarily of discussions and role play. Part 2 builds upon that and includes activities and worksheet. The key words, as you can see here, LGBT and social justice. This is being taught to little kids with stuff like this, pamphlets like this. They role play. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, role playing this in school. What we should be really teaching kids is that they're beautiful just the way they are. And a lot of stuff that we say, oh, this little boy wants to be a girl because he's playing with Barbies or walking with his mother's shoes, or this little girl, she likes to play sports or play with trucks instead of Barbies. Like, those are just based off stereotypical things that boys and girls like. Just because a little girl likes to play with trucks or a little boy plays with dolls doesn't mean he's supposed to be a woman. He's going to grow out of that most likely. And if not, if he becomes a gay man, he's into very feminine things, who cares? There is no need to be chopping up body parts of children and putting them through stuff that is irreversible when they are not old enough to make an informed decision. Kids cannot consent to this stuff.
That's just demonstrably, you can easily demonstrate that that's not the case.
And are you, Jacob, are you able to just use your common sense as well? I mean, you can rely on studies, and you could just shout the word study at me and then start.
No, I'm not.
You can start. Let me finish. Let me finish.
Sorry.
You can shout about studies and list random medical organizations. That doesn't impress me. There was a time when every medical organization would have told you that, you know, bloodletting is the way to cure every disease.
Sure.
There was a time when every medical organization told you that the vaccine, you know, stopped transmission. So, yeah. But here's what I want to know. Are we able to just use common sense as well? And based on common sense, determine that it is certainly not a good idea to sterilize and castrate children and remove body parts from children before they are possibly old enough to consent to those procedures. Can't we just, don't we know that just based on basic moral decency and common sense?
Sure, but you're trying to...
Matt Walsh just hit the nail on the head. There's a lack of common sense in everything that we're doing right now in the West when it comes to gender ideology. For this man to just stand up there and think it makes sense or he's right to do this, to advocate for this, is insane to me. These are irreversible procedures. These little kids that we do this to, they won't be able to have families of their own after this. It's done. It's over. If they're unhappy with their decision, which most likely they will be because we're doing this to them at like 10 years old, which, you know, when you were 10 years old, when I was 10 years old, you don't know anything. You barely know anything going through high school anyway. So 10 years old, we're not going to let a kid have a tattoo till they're 16, 17, 18 without their parent being there. But this is okay. A teacher can consent for kids now in a lot of states and in some spots in Canada. It's ludicrous how far we've come.
Causal statements about the impacts of medical interventions, you need to demonstrate that with science. And I'm not mentioning, and I'm not like making an ethos argument, oh, like look at this organization. I'm saying that there are like very rigorous ways to substantiate your claims, and the people that are spending lots of time are doing that. And they come to conclusions that are very different from the ones that you say. I'm not making an appeal to ethos. Anybody can look at these studies and just see how they're done.
Right, and these are also studies being done by the people who it just so happens are profiting from the procedures that they say work, which is really interesting.
Like,
but
do you think your professors are getting paid by like some?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them are.
Do you think there's somebody like paying your professors for? I think you should.
How do you think it works, Jacob?
Because that's very unrealistic.
Do you think they're not being paid?
No.
They ain't doing this for free, I tell you that.
No. They're definitely being paid. But like, if there's some shady organization paying them, like, I'm sorry, that's sort of silly. Like, talk with your professors. That's like sort of silly.
Okay. Let me
How
just
can
ask.
you know anything? There's always some conspiracy.
I think you can know things without asking for permission sometimes from professors to say that you know them.
No, I'm just saying.
And one of those things that you can know is that it's never okay to castrate a child.
Boom.
I mean, I don't need...
For anyone who doesn't think that this is big business, that these companies are enriching themselves, and in a lot of places they don't have to disclose any of the data, these companies. Check this out. This industry, the sex reassignment industry, made more than $623 million worldwide. And it's estimated that by 2032, this industry will be a $1.9 billion a year industry. And here's the data on where the growth is coming from. And the growth is coming from North America. Again, because we are teaching this and pushing this to small children in schools. Children that should be kept innocent, that have no idea. Again, children that might still believe in the Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. It's crazy. It's wrong. It's upsetting. Children should not be able to consent to any of this. We should have laws in place to protect children from the schools, the parents, anybody who wants to do this to a small child. We should have laws in place to protect these kids. Hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. Thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. Catch you all in the next one. Peace out, guys.